Hi, hello, and welcome to Rebel Unicorn Crafts. My name is Lacey, and today we're going to be exploring paper quilling. I'll go over the tools of the trade that you're going to need, some of my recommended supplies. I'll also show you some of the things that you can create, as well as tips and tricks for making them turn out the best you can, and timing. I will give you a little spoiler alert. I have been working on this piece for over 6 hours. So how to plan your time best and how to make it go by faster.
Let's go over the tools we'll need. The first thing are some strips of paper. You can either get these paper by cutting strips at home, or you can buy a pack of pre-cut strips of paper like this. They're nice because they're the same thickness and they come in a wide variety of colors, sometimes more than you would get in a pack of paper. The second thing you're going to need is another piece of paper, or I recommend a backing board. It's thick because if you use just normal paper or even a cardstock, there's enough water in the glue that it can cause warping. You can see in some of my older ones where I used just a cardstock how much warping did occur. By using the backing board or a matting board, you'll be able to do a design that doesn't have any warping, like this one. Nice and straight back. We have the paper part of the equation. Now we need the quilling part, so you'll need a paper quill. A paper quill, in essence, is going to be typically a plastic handle with a metal tip on it. And I don't personally see any difference between a more expensive versus a less expensive paper quill, so you don't need to spend a whole bunch of money on this unless you really like the handle of a nicer quill. I do have two, and I do like the handle. It's pretty of my second one, but it was probably triple the cost. I can't zoom in close enough to show you what the quill actually looks like, so I'm going to draw it. The metal tip actually looks round, but it has a little bit of a slot. So it has two sides, and in that slot of the metal part is where you put the paper in order to quill it. You also need some glue. You can use Elmer's, but my favorite is a scrapbooking glue that has two sides because the sponge tip applicator on the one side is the perfect way to get little bits of glue onto the bottom of quills without using too much. And you need some scissors. Any scissors really do. There is a recommendation to use thread snippers. And one other tool that's super fun but not required is a paper crimper. You'll also want some tweezers for easier placement. The main skill you're going to need for doing paper quilling is to quill the paper. You do this by inserting the end of the paper into the quill and twirling it around. You can change the size of these by using different lengths of paper, so cutting one in half or in fourths. I'm going to be using the entirety of this piece of strip of paper so that you can better see these different shapes. So the very first shape we're going to do is a tightly coiled quill. We leave it on the quill once it's wrapped really tight, and we add a little glue. Hold it on for just a second, and if you use the right amount of glue, you don't need to hold it for super long before you can release it and take it off. If instead of gluing this while on the quill, you release this before gluing it, it will release and open like this into a loose quill, and this will be the form for the rest of our shapes. You can leave a quill open and place it on a piece of paper, or you can close it by dabbing a little glue and attaching the end to the outside and holding for a second, and now you have a circular loose quill. You want to make sure in this that you get the edge of this and really tap it down. If you use too much glue, it will pop up. But there is our first shape. For the second shape, we'll do the same thing. And then we're going to further manipulate this into the shape of a petal by grabbing near the seam, grabbing some of the quill part, and we're going to squeeze that paper together. Pinch it with one hand, keeping one side round. The more that you get, the more shapes will bend, obviously. And this forms our second shape. It's kind of like a petal. You can use these to make flower petals. For the next shape, we start as we did previously by closing our loose quill, and then we're going to pinch, but instead of from one side, we'll pinch from two to make an eye, or you might use this as a leaf. So pinch both sides evenly. You're catching on, but in order to make our next shape, we again glue the loosely quilled coil into place. And for this, we're going to make a square. So we're going to do a similar pinch, but instead of just pinching the sides, we're also going to squeeze in, and that's going to give us a square or kind of a star shape. And again, pinch from both sides while squeezing in so that you get a crease in the middle as well. No surprise here, but we're going to start our final shape, the heart, by gluing close our loose quill. And we're going to first pinch one side to form a petal. Now this shape we're going to form using tweezers next, but if you want a more perfect heart, you can glue two petal shapes together like this, and they will make a very beautiful heart. But if you want more of a heart, or if you turn it upside down, it'll be a Star Trek emblem. What you do is you place your tweezers right in the middle, grab a few layers, and you're going to pull down and pinch up, and that will give us a little rougher heart or kind of a triangle type shape. So those are the basic shapes you'll need in order to complete the quills. You can change the size of those based on how long your strips of paper are. You could crimp them so they had a little more texture, change the colors. This part is up to you. To get started, you'll need an outline. Outlines are great for one, determining what you're going to be quilling, unless this is more of kind of an abstracted quill, but two, by making an outline and a border, we're going to give it a little bit more strength. So I'm going to show you, if you were to just draw your outline on your backing board, you run the risk of what I have here, which are some pencil marks showing in the background. So here's my first tip on how to create a good outline. Print out your desired design in the size you want it. Then you can place it over your backing board, and using a pencil, if you push hard, it's going to imprint through the paper and onto the backing board. It'll be enough where you can see the lines for your placement, but you won't be able to see them at the end of the design. We're not getting any graphite through the paper, we're just getting a pressure mark. And I don't know how well you'll be able to see this on the video, but trust me, it does work. Once you've traced your design on that you're going to use, we want to work on building this border. So we want to have our glue on hand, and we also want to use a slightly thicker paper than the pre-cut paper that I'm going to be using to fill this. The thicker the paper you use, like a cardstock for the outside, the more resilient this design will be, and it won't move around as much. So I'm using a cardstock that I have pre-cut, and I'm going to show you how I go about actually outlining this, because this is one of the most difficult parts of paper quilling. So the first is, if you have any curves in your design, you want to break the fibers of the paper, and you can do this by they have special tools for this, or you can use something like a pencil and you just run it along and it will kind of give a nice curve, and this will allow you to better move the paper in the shapes that you want it to be. You also want to be careful here, because this is where I've got my worst paper cut. But we're going to work in sections, so we want to only do portions of this because we are not going to be great at making 17 angles at once. We're probably only good at making 2 or 3. So we basically just shape in general and pick how far we're going to take this. We'll cut off excess, and I oftentimes use my tweezers as a point to figure out where and how far I want this to go and how to bend the paper next. Then we add a tiny bit of glue to the underside of this by dabbing with the sponge applicator, and we place it down and we hold it in place. If you're using an Elmer's glue, which you can use if that's what you have on hand to do this art, then you're going to need to make sure you hold this still for a lot longer. Using the scrapbooking glue, this is one of the reasons why I really want to use that, is because it dries a little bit faster, and that's particularly important in the background part of this. This will be the most frustrating part of the process, and you have to fiddle with it, but it's worth the ending, and the rest of it will go so much smoother once you get this done. Now we're finally into the nitty-gritty of it, which is placing quills into your piece. So I usually pre-quill a bunch of different shapes of the color that I want to place so that I can kind of create the different shapes and fill in gaps as necessary. And I think it's more efficient to work in batches, especially for gluing. So what you do is you make your shapes, then you grab onto them with your tweezers. I find to be the easiest way. Tap them with a little bit of glue, place them with the tweezers, and pat them down, and they should set fairly quickly if you didn't use too much glue. Personally, I think that timing is the number one thing to keep in mind for paper quilling. Some of these projects, even though they're small, if they're very tightly packed with quills, they will take you a very, very long time, like that space one that I was doing. Now, I'm not saying to not spend a ton of time, but maybe start smaller. At least when you're getting to know a new project or a new medium, the best thing to do is to do smaller projects you'll complete quickly and kind of get that bug. If you start something that's going to take you 15 total hours of work, the likelihood of you finishing that is kind of slim. So when you start, I recommend varying shapes and how tightly you coil things. You can see here I've got some examples of things. I spent 10 minutes just quilling and gluing different shapes in different densities, as well as with different sizes and things like that. So you can see how much different coverage you get based on how you're quilling and how you mix it up. Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to see more videos like this, please subscribe to my channel. If you're local to Northern Colorado and would like to take a class, visit rebelunicorncrafts.com to see my class listings. If you'd just like to see what I'm up to, visit my Instagram at rebelunicorncrafts, or if you'd like to see my art, you can visit my other Instagram at LaceyWalkerArt. Thank you again for watching, and I hope you have a magically creative day.